We had little technical difficulties, but we're here and we're excited to be here, right? Okay, so now what I'm gonna do, give me a second. I need to share this um, to the other business pages. So, Janine, do you want to talk about a little, like, start what we're gonna go over today? I did put it in the comments, so it's there. But if you want to just start it, I'm going to just make sure that this is going and it's shared and we're live and all of that. Okay. All right. So let's start with, we'll go over like the top five systems that we think every business, and let's clear up too, when we say systems, we're talking about things that repeatable tasks, workflows, meaning there's a particular process that you use in order to complete something. I think a really great example of this is content repurposing, right? So it's like you have one thing and then you put it in a bunch of different places and all of that. So I think that's a good one. So we just want to define, like, when we say a system, we're talking about recording, so video recording. We're putting it on a Google Doc that's spelled out step by step. Usually we say, like, at the very least, record a video of yourself doing whatever the process is, right? And then if you have the time, or if you have someone to delegate it to, have them type it out on a Google Doc. And then, if there's ways to automate things using different kinds of softwares and things like that, that's good. So I'll start. I think one of the most important things to have is client onboarding. Well, if we say onboarding, we could really split that into two, because it's client and team. And I think both are just as important. What do you think, Janine? Right. And being able to, especially the repeatable thing. I mean, if you're doing it over and over and over and over again, right? Like, you want to make it simple for yourself. Once you don't miss something, right? Like, checklists are so important, and making sure you don't forget something. So I mean, if your process is 20 steps, I mean, it's really going to be, it'll be easy to miss something. So you want to record it so you don't do that. And then it also just makes it easier to hand it off to someone, because then if it's in your head, right? If Janine has a great idea and she doesn't tell me, there's nothing I can do about that. Right? So, okay, onboarding. So we have team onboarding and client onboarding. I think both of them are just as important, honestly. It depends on where you're at. If you're getting ready to hire, then focusing on the team onboarding is super important. If you're, with clients, it's I mean, it's hard to say which one's more important, but I think they're both important. And it helps with the experience. Something we talked about last time was that when you hire someone and there isn't really an onboarding process, and you don't give them something to do right away, they're sort of like twiddling their thumbs, like, okay, what do I do next, right? They don't necessarily just jump into your business without you kind of onboarding them, telling them about the culture and what you want, the specific tasks you want them to do, and that kind of thing. So I think they're definitely, yeah.
Refer to each other's departments as customers of each other. So it's really an overall customer experience is how they categorize or define everything. to keep
Right.
everyone in that mindset of it is important how you're treated and the feeling you get and the experience you have at every point
Right.
inside and outside the company.
And it just makes getting started a lot easier, right? I mean, then there's less headache when you're bringing someone on board, um, or client or team member. It makes the process a lot smoother, and you can get started quicker, right? I mean, if you are able to give the person that you're hiring their first task and say, here's exactly how I need you to do it, and here's all the logins, and here's you delegate everything right away, and everything's very clear. It makes just the experience a lot better on both sides, and it's less of a headache on the business owner or the person hiring. I will just drop a quick. I do have a hire your first contractor bundle that Janine and I use the process for our own clients, and I'll put the link in the comments. There's a full checklist, and then a bundle of SOP templates and swipe files and stuff, and 2 Trello board templates. So I'll drop the link for that after we get done. So, all right. So other than onboarding, what do you think is another system or process that's really important to have? Whether you're starting out or just, it's like if you're going down a checklist of like, all right, we have onboarding, like what's the next thing? Do you think that's most important?
Well, I think just going to the fundamental functions of your business, it's like, well, you need to, right, generate leads and bring that into your company. So wherever you can, however you're doing that, via social media or advertising or whatever it is that you're doing, the more you can automate that, the more effective you can be further.
Right. And if it's not automated, have the steps recorded. So what do you do when someone reaches out and has a question? What's the next step, right? So they connect with you, or maybe they want to get on a call with you. What do you do then? Do you have a follow-up email that you send? Do you book another call? Like whatever that is, just putting that in um, written out so that you follow it the same way every time. And so what happens? Do you send them a link to book a call, or whatever that might look like for your business? Is having that is definitely important.
Yep, and that's part of the experience. It should be consistent from one person to the next each time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I was just trying to think about some of the initial systems. I think something that's really important is having the communication SOP in place. So how do you communicate? What's the organizational chart, meaning who talks to who reports to who, kind of thing. And if you just have one team member, then obviously it's just the two of you, but there still needs to be a way to communicate. For example, with one of our clients, all tasking, actually we do this with all of our clients, but all tasking is done, communication around tasking is all done in the project management tool. So if you use Trello, it's always done in Trello. If there's something that you need to have a conversation outside of the tasking, or maybe some brainstorming, it can go in. We use Slack with one of our clients, so it goes in Slack. But then all those notes ultimately need to go back into Trello, into that task that or project that we talked about. And so we spell that out very clearly, because if you don't, you're going to start having, maybe you use Voxer. And so you have messages on Voxer, you have some messages in Trello, you have some messages in Slack. And then all of a sudden, when you're trying to find or remember what someone said, or you task someone with something and it's in Slack, but they went to Trello and then it gets missed. Like, I mean, you're setting yourself up kind of for failure at that point. So making sure that that is super clear is really important. And it's something that I preach constantly to our clients, that you need to stick with it, and making sure so everyone's on the same page. So I'd say communication, you said lead generation, the onboarding. What else? I was trying to think of the other things that we set up initially when we go in.
Well, I just wanted to add a little to communication. It's like, yeah, it can totally get out of control between two people and all the communication channels there are. So it's good to get into best practices from the very beginning. If you're bringing on a project manager or an ops person, it's like they have to have eyes on what's going on. So it's important that all those things be in one place. And then I would also, just along the lines of communication, it's like I like to make sure that people are clear that when you drop something, it doesn't mean that somebody picked it up and it's still on you until they do, because that whole, oh, but I sent the email, but I made the, left the comment, but it's like, it's still who owns that, right? Until it's positively picked up somewhere else. And that helps facilitate communications if everyone understands that.
Yeah. That kind of leads into like a project management SOP. So that's something, how things are tasked, where they get tasked, excuse me. So it leads, so the communication one leads into the project management SOP. And that talks about how things are tasked, who's tasking, how do they respond, and it goes through all the steps. So I definitely think that that's important, especially as your team grows. It's so important to have some sort of project management or just a task management SOP in general. And then once you hire someone that's going to own that process, because you won't own it forever, then they will already know how you want that done. And these, again, let's also say that processes and workflows and SOPs, all these things are living documents and living processes, right? Like they're going to constantly be changing as you improve, how you do things, as you find ways to automate things. Like these things are going to constantly change. But so definitely, I think a project management or task management, whatever you want to call it, is important as well. So what else? We said we'd do 5.
Well,
so we've
the
done
next
4.
thing, is pulling that all together in the form of how are you delivering it? Because depending on the complexity of the project, whether it's an event, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, any kind of thing, is bringing all those individual tasks that went out to the team all have to come back together and get to the customer in a way that reinforces the customer service experience you want them to have.
Right. Exactly. And one thing I didn't mention is all of these, so the communication one, the project management, and what you just mentioned, all also apply to your clients. So if you're working with clients, you need to establish the lines of communication with the client and who is the client going to talk to. So setting up expectations in the beginning to say, okay, here's how you send us task requests. Here's how you send us, this is how we're going to send you deliverables for your project. Here's how here's who you'll communicate with and how you communicate with them. And so not only is it for internal, but it's also for external. All of those things are, right? So one of the things that we do with a client is each client gets their own Trello board. Now that is outside, that's outside of the internal operations of task management and project management. It's its own board where the client can submit additional work requests. They get weekly updates in there. They can see the progress. They can see the project plans. All of that is for the client. And the client knows we set up from the very beginning that this is how you communicate with us. It has to be in Trello, and we set that up. Otherwise, how would we, it's easy to then lose the request or not hear back from them. They don't know when things are ready for review and all of that. So
there's also just being in the habit of being open about everything that's going on, because at some point something's going to not work right. And then you're going to have to communicate that with the client. And the more proactive you are, not only about what's going on, but coming to them with, hey, here's the problem, and here's here's the solution. Here's what we're applying to mitigate this situation. People would rather know what's going on. The most melodrama comes from, missed expectations and poor communications. So just when they know you're communicative and you're on their side and you're doing everything, when those little glitches happen, they're going to be much more understanding and forgiving.
And that's part of the onboarding process. So all those things we mentioned should be part of the onboarding process. That first call, here's how this is laying everything out. This is how it's going to go. And then if anything changes, you get back on a call with them and explain it to them. So, okay, so we named 5. So let's talk about getting people on board. So one of the first things that I want to mention, and hopefully no one takes this personally, but people will hire someone like us or people like us to come in and implement systems and processes and SOPs in their business and then resist following them. Listen, if you're going to bring people like us in, you got to give it a chance. Like, to bring us in and then not follow what we've implemented is just a waste of time and money. I mean, as much as we like to get paid for what we do, we also don't want it to be a waste of our time. So You're not going to get the results that you want if you don't follow. I mean, we tell clients at least try the new process for a minimum of 30 days. Just like when you hire people, you want to give them a trial, you got to give the process a trial too. And, following them. So if a communication SOP is set up, like you have to follow that. And your operations person, if and when you hire someone like that, they should absolutely call you on your shit if you don't follow it. And we do. I'm just saying they should. So yeah. That's the first thing is you got to follow it. But let's talk about how to get other team members, because change can be rough. Some people resist it, and other people are fine with it, kind of go with the flow. So what do you think, Janine?
Well, that's the important point, is that it's just human nature to resist change, even the person who wants the change. And so we're laughing about, if you hire us, give it a chance. But just recognizing that that's normal, feeling that resistance so you can get past it and keep going with the change that you want, because you want the result, right? So you have to get yourself past that. And it takes a while. This is part of habit forming, right? A change becomes the new habit with the systems that we're putting in, both for the business owner and for the team. So setting the example in that, but I would have this talk with them in advance, prep them so they know it's coming. Nobody likes a surprise, but it lowers the resistance of, hey, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, and it's going to take us a little to get used to it. So we're going to help each other push through this and be encouraging about that and open about that. So when we implement something, we often give a time frame of, oh, hey, this will probably take these many days or a week or two.
Usually
or
it's
whatever,
90
to get
really
into routine. Yeah,
right,
but I mean,
to
just
even,
for one thing, right? Just to get it to the point where it's really working and refined. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you have to get in that habit of using it, but that's normal. So.
And sometimes you have to work out the kinks in it. So if it's your onboarding process, right, you might have to go through it a couple of times to make sure that it works, and take clients through. And it's a lot easier to do it if you're doing it with like actual clients and then working through and making sure that it's good, or practicing it, but sometimes it takes a couple of times to get through. One of the things we do with clients is we do strategic planning. So we build out, the annual, and then we break it down to quarterly and weekly and all of that. And getting used to those meetings can be tough because it might seem like a lot, but when you kind of get through it and mold it to what you need in your business, it just takes time to refine the process, and it might change. And you have to kind of let the team know ahead of time, like, hey, we're going to start to implement this new system, and there's going to be some changes. There might be some changes. It might not, this isn't the finished product, but you at least have to try it to see if it's going to work, if it'll work from the beginning. So
yeah, and that process of change feels the same, whether it's the whole strategic planning for your business, or just making that one little training video for your very first assistant to do that thing for you, where you have that, oh, it feels like it's more work than it's worth, right? And it's a little more work to be a lot less work for the long run.
Yeah, well, that's ultimately why you would even implement all of these things anyway, is to really save you time in your business, save you time when you're delegating, when you're hiring people, when you're bringing clients on. It just makes your business run a lot smoother. That's the whole point of all these things. So yeah, I mean, they're just super important. And I mean, we could probably go on for hours. When we go into people's businesses, there's lots and lots of systems and process. I mean, if you just think for a minute about the things that you do constantly, they're repeated things that you do, that's a process, and that should be recorded. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it's important, just at the very least, record a video of yourself doing it. And if it's not online and you can't just do a Loom video, then maybe you record yourself like talking through as you do whatever that process is. Maybe you do shipping or something like that, and whatever that means. And then just create a database, a folder with the recordings. And then at some point you can have it typed out if you don't have the time for that up front. And then the next step that Janine and I do is we put it into the project management tool. So, those are kind of the three places we have it. A Google Doc, there's a recording of a video, and then it's typed out on an SOP. Because if one thing fails, you still want to be able to follow the process. Did you have anything else as far as going over those? So we said, the onboarding, lead generation, communication. What else did we say? I forget now. Project management. What was the last one?
The very last one? Now I just blanked on it too.
All right. Well, anyway,
but yeah, I just wanted to round it up with, it's like every business being at a different stage and a different size and a different industry. It's like the Pareto's rule applies, the 80-20, right? Pick the one that is going to best streamline where the biggest bottleneck in your business is.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. So that is our show for today. Thank you so much. I got some comments on the other page, and I think there was a comment, but it didn't show up to us. So if you commented or asked a question, we will check it out. If you join us next week, we're going to be going over Trello. Janine and I have created a task management system in Trello. We're going to go over some parts of that, talk about ways to use it. I don't know, we'll come up with, we haven't really made the plan yet. So we'll be going over Trello next week. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments. If you need support in hiring, building your team, shoot us a message. We have customized packages that we put together for clients. So feel free to message Janine or I. You can leave a comment, but we will, we'll get back to you. So if you're looking for support, we're here, and we'd love to support you on that. So again, next week, Trello, we'll be reviewing Trello and going over our task management system that we've set up and we use with clients. And again, if you have questions, let us know. And if you're watching the replay, put #replay, let us know you watched. We appreciate everyone that joined live, and we will see you next week for Masterfully Integrated. Bye.
Bye.